The wind carried the dry rattle of leaves across the prairie that night, the moon low, pale against the black. Lantern light flickered from the crooked porch of Jonas Crow's shack, a place where cruelty seemed to hang thicker than smoke. Inside, the girl stood rigid, her dress slipping loose at the shoulder, eyes wide with fear. Jonas leaned close, breath sour with whiskey. "Jonas, don't fight me, girl. You got nowhere else to run." She backed away, trembling, her voice barely a whisper. "Girl, don't touch me there." Her words cracked like glass in the silence, but Jonas only grinned, stepping forward. His boots thudded heavy against the floorboards, each step a threat. She pressed against the wall, fingers clawing at the wood, praying for escape that never came. Then, hooves. A horse outside. A shadow dismounted, boots crunching gravel. The porch boards groaned. The door creaked open. Thomas Hale stood there, lantern glow catching the edges of his weathered face. His hat brim was low, his coat heavy with dust from the trail, but his eyes burned steady and sharp. Jonas straightened, sneer twisting his face. "Jonas, this ain't your business, rancher." Thomas didn't blink. His voice was calm, but it cut like a blade. "Thomas, let her go." The girl's chest heaved, her hands still clutched to her dress, eyes darting between them. Jonas laughed, but the sound was hollow. "Jonas, she's mine. Always will be." Thomas stepped further in, the wooden floor creaking under his boots. His hand hovered near the worn leather of his holster, but his voice stayed low, steady, almost a growl. "Thomas, not tonight. Not ever again." For a moment the world held its breath. The lantern flame shivered. The girl's heartbeat thundered in her ears. Jonas's smirk wavered under the weight of Thomas's stare. Outside, the night wind rose, carrying the promise of a storm. Inside, something had already shifted. For the first time in years, the girl felt a sliver of safety, thin as dawn light, but real. And in that silent standoff, the rancher's presence spoke louder than bullets. This fight wasn't over, but she would not face it alone. The desert night was merciless, colder than iron and darker than sin. Jonas's fury boiled after the rancher's intrusion. He dragged the girl outside by her wrist, his grip like iron shackles. Her cry split the silence, but no one near enough could hear. He shoved her toward the riverbank, where the moonlight shimmered like broken glass on the water's surface. "Jonas, you think anyone's coming for you? That rancher won't save you. Nobody ever does." She stumbled, knees scraping against rock, the loose hem of her dress trailing in dirt. She gasped for breath, her voice raw. "Girl, please, stop. I can't," but mercy wasn't in him. He forced her down to the edge of the water, the current rushing fast and cold. His hand pressed against the back of her neck, pushing her face toward the dark waves. Panic clawed through her chest. She fought, kicking, coughing, her lungs burning with terror. The river swallowed her scream. Water surged into her mouth, choking her, dragging her into silence. Her hands clawed at the rocks, nails breaking, skin tearing. For a moment, the world narrowed to bubbles and shadows, and she thought, "This is how I'll die." Jonas's voice rasped above her, cruel and slurred. "Jonas, you belong to me, girl. Even the river can't wash you clean of that." Her strength waned, but somewhere deep the spark of defiance flared. She twisted, nails catching his wrist, biting down on his hand with all the strength she had left. He roared, jerking back. Air rushed into her lungs, sharp and freezing, but alive. She scrambled to the shallows, coughing, every breath tearing her throat raw. Jonas raised his hand, fist clenched, ready to strike. The moon caught the madness in his eyes, the veins in his neck bulging with rage. But before the blow landed, hoofbeats thundered in the distance, echoes of salvation rolling closer. Jonas froze, fury boiling into fear. The girl collapsed against the riverbank, soaked and shivering, but her eyes lifted toward the sound. Her heart clung to that single rhythm of hooves. Because maybe, just maybe, someone was coming. The cabin door swung open with a groan, lantern light spilling out into the dark like a lifeline. Thomas Hale lifted her from the saddle as if she were weightless, her soaked dress clinging, her body trembling from the river's grip. She gasped as warmth hit her face, the glow of fire, the scent of wood smoke, the crackle that promised safety. "Thomas, Easy now. You're safe here. His voice was gravel and steadiness, the kind that anchored a storm. He set her gently near the hearth, wrapping a wool blanket around her shoulders. Her lips quivered, teeth chattering, but her eyes, red and swollen, still carried a flicker of fight. She tried to speak, her voice breaking. Girl, he tried to... Thomas cut her words short, not with dismissal, but with a firm shake of his head. Thomas, don't waste your breath on him. Drink. He poured water from a jug into a tin cup, pressing it into her hands. She held it tight, the tremor in her fingers spilling drops onto the dirt floor. He crouched low, eye level with her, his weathered face etched with something she hadn't seen in a long time, concern without demand. The wind outside rattled the shutters, a reminder of the danger still lurking. She flinched, pulling the blanket closer, as if Jonas's shadow might crawl through the cracks. Girl, he won't stop. He'll come again. Thomas's gaze hardened, the firelight reflecting off his steel eyes. He stood slowly, his boots heavy on the planks. Thomas. Then he'll have to come through me. She looked up at him, startled. No one had ever spoken for her like that. No one had dared to stand between her and the monster that claimed her life. Her tears came then, not from weakness but from release, falling quietly as the fire's glow warmed her skin. She clutched the blanket, whispering to herself more than him. Girl, I don't want to be afraid anymore. Outside, the night howled, but inside the cabin, the fire burned steady. And for the first time, she felt what it was like to belong somewhere safe. The night hadn't settled long before trouble returned. The girl sat near the fire, wrapped in the blanket, her eyes fixed on the flames like they were the only thing holding her together. Thomas stood at the window, one hand resting against the wooden frame, listening to the restless wind. Then came the sound, boots crunching gravel, too heavy to be chance, too close to be ignored. The girl's breath hitched. Girl, it's him! Thomas's jaw tightened. He didn't reach for his gun yet. He stepped slowly to the door, his presence calm, steady, like a wall that wouldn't bend. The latch lifted. The door creaked open. Jonas Crow stood there, the stench of whiskey rolling in before him, a twisted grin carved into his face. The lantern's glow caught the jagged scar down his cheek, his eyes fevered with hate. Jonas. Thought you could steal what's mine, rancher? The girl pressed back against the chair, clutching the blanket, but Thomas didn't move an inch. His voice came low, firm. Thomas, she was never yours. Jonas's laugh was sharp, cruel, filling the small cabin with poison. He took a step inside, hand twitching near his belt knife. Jonas, you think a piece of dirt like you can stop me? She belongs where I put her. Thomas's hand shifted, resting on the butt of his revolver. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. The room held its breath. Thomas, turn around, Crow. You've got one chance. For a heartbeat, it seemed Jonas might test him. His eyes darted, his breath quickened, but the steel in Thomas's stance made the choice clear. With a hiss of frustration, Jonas spat on the floor, backing toward the door. Jonas, this ain't over. You hear me? She's mine till the grave. The door slammed as he left, the echo rattling through the cabin like thunder. Silence returned, broken only by the girl's shaking breaths. She looked at Thomas, voice thin but certain. Girl, he'll come back. Thomas's gaze stayed on the door, his hand still steady on the revolver. Thomas, then I'll be waiting. The fire cracked louder, defiant against the night, as the storm of violence gathered beyond the ranch. The dawn broke slow, painting the sky in pale strokes of red and gold. But the weight of the night still lingered heavy inside the cabin. The girl sat at the table, her hands wrapped tight around a tin cup she hadn't touched. Thomas stood at the door, hat in hand, staring out across the barren fields where dust swirled in the early light. The sound of hooves rose steady from the distance, not the reckless thunder of outlaws, but the measured rhythm of law. A figure rode up, coat flapping, badge glinting faintly in the rising sun. Sheriff Colton McGraw, older than Thomas but cut from the same iron, dismounted with a slow, deliberate grace. The girl tensed, clutching her cup tighter, fear etched into her posture. Thomas turned back to her, his voice low and grounding. Thomas, It's the law, not him. You're safe. The sheriff stepped inside, his boots leaving dry dust across the wooden floor. He removed his hat, nodding politely to her before fixing his gaze on Thomas. Sheriff, word reached me Crow was back in these parts, and trouble follows that man like vultures to carrion. Thomas gave a small nod. Thomas, he came here last night. Tried to take her. He'll be back. The sheriff's eyes softened as they moved to the girl. She shifted uneasily, her voice breaking when she spoke. Girl, he said, he won't stop till I'm dead. The room grew heavier. The sheriff knelt slightly, his voice steady but kind. Sheriff, miss, no man owns you. And no man has the right to put that kind of fear in your heart. That ends now. Her eyes welled, not with weakness but with a strange, unfamiliar feeling. Hope, fragile but real. The sheriff straightened, adjusting his coat. Sheriff, I'll put word through town. Deputies will ride by. Crow shows his face again. He won't just face you, Hale. He'll face the law. Thomas's jaw tightened, his hand brushing the brim of his hat. Thomas, that's all I ask. The sheriff left as the sun climbed higher, the promise of justice lingering in the dust his horse kicked up. Inside, the girl sat straighter, still shaken, but no longer alone. For the first time in years, she believed there might be an end to the nightmare. The night came heavy, black as coal, and silent as the grave. The girl had dozed near the fire, the blanket drawn up to her chin, but Thomas never closed his eyes. He sat in the chair by the door, rifle laid across his lap, lantern burning low. He knew men like Jonas didn't vanish. They circled back, meaner than before. Then it came. The crunch of hooves in the dirt, the low murmur of voices outside, the faint glimmer of torchlight slipping through the cracks of the shutters. The girl stirred, eyes wide with fear. Girl, it's him. Thomas rose slowly, his shadow stretching across the wall, steady as stone. He set a hand on her shoulder, his voice deep, calm. Thomas, stay low. Stay quiet! The cabin door rattled as fists pounded against it, the hinges groaning. Jonas's voice roared through the night, drunk with rage. Jonas, Hale, you think you can keep her from me? Open this door or I'll burn your walls to ash. The girl pressed against the floorboards, trembling, but Thomas didn't waver. He lifted the lantern, his face half in shadow. Thomas, Crow, you cross this line tonight. You don't walk away. Laughter answered him, cruel, sharp, multiplied. Jonas hadn't come alone. The shuffle of boots circled the cabin, the hiss of fire as torches were raised high. The glow painted the windows in a devil's orange light. Jonas, she's mine! Always was, always will be. You can't hide her, old man. Not from me. Not from the grave. The girl covered her ears, tears streaming. But Thomas stood firm, his rifle steady, his presence unshaken. Outside, the gang jeered, their shadows growing longer, closing in. The first torch struck the side of the cabin, flames licking the wood. Smoke curled into the room, stinging her eyes, filling her lungs. She coughed, panic clawing up her chest. Thomas pulled her close, his voice cutting through the crackle of fire. Thomas, breathe, look at me. You're not alone in this. The roar of the outlaws grew louder, the pounding at the door relentless. The cabin shuddered under their fury, and in that moment, with fire climbing the walls and hell waiting outside, the battle for her soul truly began. The fire spread fast, hungry tongues of flame climbing the cabin's outer walls, smoke pressing in through every crack. The girl coughed, clutching the blanket, her eyes wild with terror. Thomas pushed her low to the floor, his voice steady even as the walls groaned. Thomas, stay down. Trust me. Outside, Jonas howled like a beast, his torch raised high. Jonas, burn it to the ground. Drag her out when the fire takes him. His gang roared in reply, their boots trampling the dirt, fists hammering at the door. The cabin shuddered under their weight. The girl squeezed her eyes shut, tears cutting through the soot on her face. Then, gunfire cracked through the night. A sharp whistle cut the chaos. Horses thundered in from the dark, voices shouting with authority. Sheriff McGraw, Crow! Drop it now! You're surrounded! The pounding stopped. The gang faltered, torches wavering in the wind. Jonas spun, fury twisting into something darker, fear. Jonas, Sheriff, this ain't your fight. The sheriff's voice rang out again, firm as iron. "Sheriff McGraw, it is tonight. Stand down or face the rope." The gang hesitated, shadows caught between loyalty and survival. One by one, torches dropped into the dirt, sputtering out. The circle of orange firelight shrank until only Jonas stood defiant. Chest heaving, knife still in his grip. From inside the smoke-filled cabin, the girl peered through the cracks, hope breaking through her terror. Thomas helped her to her feet, his hand steady on her back. Jonas roared, raising the blade. "Jonas, she's mine! You can't take her from me." Before he could lunge, the sheriff's pistol fired, a single shot cracking the night, striking the ground inches from Jonas's boots. His bravado shattered. Deputies surged forward, wresting the knife from his hand, dragging him to the dirt. He kicked and cursed, but the fight was gone. The girl stumbled out into the night air, coughing, her eyes catching the stars beyond the smoke. For the first time in years, she breathed without chains around her chest. Thomas stood beside her, dust and ash clinging to his coat, his eyes fixed on Jonas as the shackles snapped shut. The nightmare wasn't over yet, but its grip had finally broken. The dawn came soft, washing the prairie in pale gold, the kind of light that seemed to whisper of new beginnings. Smoke still rose in thin trails from the blackened wood of the cabin, but the fire was out, and with it the terror of the night. The girl sat on the steps of the porch, blanket still around her shoulders, though she no longer trembled. Her eyes followed the horizon, where the sun climbed slow but certain. Thomas stood a few feet away, leaning against the post, hat low over his eyes. He didn't speak at first. He knew some silences needed to breathe,